Good morning. Welcome to the press, to our legislative champions who are here with us today, and to all of our advocacy partners. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dee Dee Hill. I am Policy Director for the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy. We are a statewide nonprofit dedicated to advancing policies that strengthen New York families and children, particularly low-income families. And I'm also here representing the New York CHAMPS campaign. And the campaign is a statewide group of child and family advocates and service providers dedicating to ensuring that children remain safely with their families whenever possible. And if they must enter foster care, they are placed with kin or in a family with all the supports that they need to thrive. Before we get started, let me just cover a couple of housekeeping items. We have a great lineup of speakers who I will introduce in turn. Each is going to speak briefly, and all will be available to answer questions afterwards or to speak offline should the press wish to dive in deeper. Our chat box and our Q&A box are open, so throw questions in there, and when the formal remarks are finished, I'll start reading out the questions and directing those questions to the speakers and some of our expert panelists. And to the press, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Our message that we are conveying today is that New York must take immediate steps to ensure that no young person entrusted in the state's foster care is pushed from their home during the COVID-19 pandemic simply because they have turned 21, nor should any young person be prevented from returning to foster care, to their home, simply because they decided to go out on their own before they turned 21. Even in the best of times, aging out of foster care is a difficult, sometimes even traumatic transition. What aging out typically means is that the youth was unable to reunite with their family or connect with another kin or adoptive family. So under even normal circumstances, non-pandemic circumstances, young people who transition out of foster care without a family, they often faced instability in housing, in income, in employment. Of course, in the middle of a global health crisis that, like the one we're facing, when a safe and stable home is key to both individual and public health, and when we're in this moment, when unemployment, when housing instability, when food insecurity are just skyrocketing for all New Yorkers, the risks to young people being pushed out on their own, the risks are extraordinary. Just like parents all around the state and around the country are welcoming their grown children back into their homes, or maybe they're not, maybe there's some fighting going on, some tension, but they're all being allowed to come home. New York State, we have to ensure that we open our doors to our foster youth. They need a home that they can weather this pandemic in. So today we are urging swift passage of legislation that would do three things. First, it would extend foster care services for youth for 180 days after New York State fully reopens from the pandemic. Second, it would allow all young people who are formerly in foster care but who left before age 21 to easily return to care without court involvement. And then number three, it would require that New York State cover all costs that counties incur to provide care for these youth. Counties right now are stretched far too thin to cover these costs. Happily, Senator Montgomery and Assemblymember Wright their bill, and then also Assemblymember Barrett and Jaffe and Senator Montgomery's bills. Both of these bills would do these three things, and we are so grateful for their leadership. I want to acknowledge that we were gathered about a month ago in a similar press event. Many of the same folks were here. And at that time, we were urging Governor Cuomo to immediately issue an executive order doing these three things. And at that time, and still, we noted that 9 other states have already done this. This is the right thing to do. Unfortunately, the governor has not yet acted. And so, again, we are very grateful that our legislative champions that are here with us today have stepped up and are moving this legislation. Before I turn things over to our speakers, I want to play a clip from our May press conference. And what you're going to see are remarks by Destiny Mora. She was 20 years old at the time that she participated in our press conference, a student at Borough of Manhattan Community College. And I think you'll find that Destiny's remarks really underscore why this legislation is so critical.
All right, thanks, Dee Dee. I'm Crystal Charles, Policy Analyst at Schuyler Center, and I'll be sharing the video here.
To obtain
We're having some technical difficulties. One moment.
Okay.
Almost. So I think in the interest of time, Crystal, why don't should we try to return to this after our legislative panelists speak? Okay. You know, you'd think we would have all of this Zoom technology down by now, but we still get stumped every so often. So sorry about that. So I am really pleased to turn things over right now to Assemblymember Ellen Jaffe. She is chair of the Assembly Committee on Children and Families. She's a former educator. She is a fierce, tireless champion for New York children and families. So Assemblymember Jaffe, thank you so much for your support, and I'm turning things over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dee Dee, and thank you so much, Schuyler Center, and everyone who joined today, especially for really moving forward to have this discussion and to share the information that is so essential. so many of young adults reaching the age of 21 are accompanied very often by a huge celebration and, you know, seen as the rite of passage. But for those who are on the precipice of aging out of foster care on their birthday, it's time, you know, it really is, that time is fraught with fear all too often and anxiety. And when that scenario collides with the worldwide pandemic as we are facing, the results generally become very overwhelming. But aging out is the worst case scenario for any child in foster care. It means that the child was not reunited with their family all too often, and throughout their time in foster care, not connected to any other, you know, really permanent familial support. And it is certainly challenging for so many. And I've had conversations with those who have come to my office to have a conversation, and I've discovered so much of that. These circumstances, compounded with the childhood trauma associated with entry into foster care, so often impact young people's achievement in college, ability to maintain their employment and housing, and right now, all too often threatens their health as well. So now, as New Yorkers turn to family and home in the face of this pandemic, it is more important than ever that our young people, our youth, achieve, you know, have the opportunity to have that strength, have the achievement in college, their ability to maintain employment and housing, and which right now, you know, still is very, very challenging in many ways. Now, 9 other states, you know, really have already seen the need rise and have answered it with the state action. And yet New York, the state, you know, still most heavily hit by the pandemic, has yet to provide the aging out youth with that safety net. And that's something we have to really move forward and work on. So absent an executive order, we stand with CHAMPS New York and the attorneys for children today. We stand together because we have to encourage the leadership in each house to prioritize our new legislation, which would provide for a 180-day extension of foster care services, and do so without that requirement of a lengthy court process. Our youth, young adults, need more than ever this effort moving forward, providing them that stability and that future. And we need to work together to see if we can move forward with legislation and really immediately provide them that opportunity. It is so essential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Jaffe. I am now going to turn things over to Assemblymember Barrett, and she is chair of the Assembly Committee on Veterans Affairs. She's also chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, and we are so grateful that you're here and that you are leading the charge on this legislation.
Thank you, Dee Dee. It's not often that I'm ever on a call, not to mention a Zoom with another Dee Dee. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone who is part of this. Thank you to our chair, Ellen Jaffe, for her longtime leadership in this area, and to Senator Montgomery, and to my colleague Tremaine Wright for her commitment as well. And I just, you know, I really hope that we can get this done and get this across the finish line, because, you know, as a mother of 2 young adults, you know, I know for me and, you know, and they're past 21, that the trauma and the impact of these, you know, last few months has been extraordinary in so many different ways. And the notion of being 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 and being kind of thrown into the world of having to fend for yourself, often with children, without family, without kin, is, you know, it's unimaginable to me. And I am disappointed that we didn't get the executive order that you all had pursued, but I hope that we can cross the finish line with this legislation. And there's a real sense of urgency, as my colleagues and as Dee Dee said. 9 other states have done this. They got it, and New York really needs to step up to the plate and make sure that these children who are basically our responsibility are getting the opportunities and the support that they need, and not being denied that because of kind of an arbitrary policy that really didn't take into consideration what this country, this state, and the world have gone through over these last few months. So I hope that we can get this done. I appreciate one of my constituents and friend, Rob Harwitz, was initially brought this to my attention. I hope we can, count on the support of advocates across the state to reach out to our leadership, to our speaker, and to the majority leader in the Senate, and make sure it passes in both of the houses, and we get this done soon, so that young people can know that that New York State is standing behind them, as we have for so many other parts of our community over these last few months. So thank you, and let's get this done.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Yes, let's get this done. And I can tell you right now, we are right there beside you. So you can rely on us. And now I am so happy to introduce Assembly Member Wright. Thank you so much for joining us. Assembly Member Wright is chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. She's also chair of the Assembly Subcommittee on Foster Care. She has always been an Assembly member that we can rely on to champion issues related to children in care and just children in general. So thank you so much for being here. You're on mute.
We are still working out all the kinks in Zoom, but thank you very much. And thank you for assembling us all together, allowing us to come together as a unified body to speak on this very important issue today. And today I'm a little worried that we must gather to remind all of the adults in the room that we are in the midst of a pandemic. We're struggling through uncharted borders where we're being advised to stay home, don't congregate, work from home, stay off of mass transit, eat at home, don't use public gyms, again, reduce your interactions with strangers, and stay home. The single message we've heard for the last 16 weeks was to stay home. Yet we are not ensuring our foster youth with stable housing during this time if they happen to turn 21. There's no magic in turning 21, and our youth in foster care need the stability and support of home during this time. Since March, advocates and legislators have been calling for a moratorium on children aging out of foster care. Our bills would allow our youth to remain in foster care during this pandemic, this state of emergency. We have a responsibility to protect and provide our youth with that. And that responsibility demands that we create a system that provides safety, structure, and stability. We must provide our foster youth with a home and support, especially at a time like this. The health pandemic, coupled with the hyper-awareness of the ongoing racial discrimination pandemic, subsequent protests and riots, and astronomical unemployment and a lack of affordable housing with growing numbers of homelessness, means we are in a state of emergency. We must not leave our foster youth without a support system. We have to take this moment to create an emergency response system for our youth. We should be providing immediate care with a moratorium on aging out of foster care, and we should be developing a plan for moving forward. We should be embracing Bill A10069, which would create the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsman to provide support for foster parents, biological parents, relatives, and youth in care. The Office of the Ombudsman would be responsible for helping devise statewide plans to assist our families and youth and OCFS. The Office of the Ombudsman can help us to craft an emergency plan so we're not pushing away our youth who happen to turn 21 during a pandemic. We have to develop an emergency response plan that promotes our youth's health, wellness, and stability. and fulfills our responsibility to care for our youth. Today, we demand action, and we demand that we do what's right for our youth. Today, we must put a moratorium on youth aging out of foster care. Today, we must renew our commitment to provide healthy and safe provisions for our young people. Today, we must make clear that we understand this is our responsibility and we will meet the need. I'm happy to be standing with all of our advocates, with CHAMPS, Schuyler Center, the attorneys for the children, my fellow legislators, and our foster youth. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Wright. And thank you, we are here today focused on this urgent need to pass legislation to prevent any youth from aging out of foster care during this pandemic. But thank you also for raising attention to the Ombudsman bill, because we are at this moment, we have an opportunity as we rebuild New York to build back better, and having an Ombudsman is absolutely a voice to elevate the needs of our foster youth is critical to building back better. So thank you so much. And I want to acknowledge that Senator Montgomery is on the phone with us today. Senator Montgomery is chair of the Senate Children and Families. She is, I don't even know what to say, except that we have valued her leadership. We so value her leadership for so many years. The children of New York State are much better for having her leading this committee and leading the state and putting them front and center in Albany. So thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this effort. Let us know in the chat if you would like to speak at any point. For now, I am going to turn things over to Betsy Kramer, and she is Director of Policy and Special Litigation at Lawyers for Children. And she is also here on behalf of a statewide coalition of attorneys for youth in foster care, has really been a leader around this effort. Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks, Dee Dee. From the earliest days of this pandemic, attorneys from all around New York State who represent children in foster care recognize the particular danger posed to youth aging out of foster care at this time. Attorneys from Suffolk, Rockland, Buffalo, Elmira, Ithaca, Rochester, and all 5 boroughs of New York City have been asking New York State to protect these children. And I'd like to share with you today a tale of 2 clients. Both were born in 1999. Both have been in foster care for many years. Both have mental health issues and receive enhanced supportive services from the foster care system. Neither client has a family to help care for them as they age out of foster care. In order to succeed on their own, both will need a stable source of income, ongoing mental health treatment, and permanent housing. Because of the pandemic, it's been difficult, to say the least, to put these things in place. These 2 clients have so much in common, and yet one small difference in their lives means that the outcomes for them may be very, very different. One client lives in Buffalo, where he will be forced to leave foster care when he turns 21 in a few short months. Because proper discharge planning has not been possible, access to housing and community-based mental health services is limited, and finding employment is nearly impossible. When this young man turns 21, he will likely be homeless, unemployed, and without any of the supportive services he needs to succeed. The other client lives in New York City. She turned 21 this spring after Governor Cuomo declared a state of emergency. Unlike her peer upstate, she has the good fortune to live in a county where the local Department of Social Services has allowed youth to remain in foster care after turning 21 if they have no place else to go. She has a roof over her head. She continues to receive mental health services, and after in-person educational programs shut down, her caseworker helped her enroll in an online bartending course, which she completed last week. She now has training and skills that will help her attain employment as restaurants and bars begin to reopen. It's widely known that youth who age out of foster care face dismal odds for long-term success. Those odds have been made even worse by this pandemic. We are so grateful to Senator Montgomery and to Assembly members Barrett, Wright, and Jaffe for championing legislation that would help youth beat those odds by giving them the opportunity to remain in foster care after 21, no matter where they live in the state. The legislature and Governor Cuomo must act quickly to enact this legislation so that youth in foster care who turn 21 during the state of emergency and youth who need to return to foster care have a chance to succeed, from New York City to Buffalo and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. So now we are going to move on to some questions, and we have a few in the Q&A box, and don't be shy, keep them coming. So I am going to get started with the first one. The first question is, in the last month, did New York's executive branch provide a reply indicating that they would not issue an executive order to impose a moratorium on aging out of foster care? And I'm going to ask Betsy to take the lead on that.
So we wrote to the governor and OCFS early on in the pandemic and received a response indicating that they would not issue an executive order. And since then, we have not received any indication, despite repeated requests, that position has changed. And that's why legislation is so important at this point.
And I think, Betsy, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat because there's a sort of follow-up question, I think, which is, which counties are currently allowing youth to remain in care past 21?
So all of New York City is allowing, so that's the 5 counties of New York City. And we were told by OCFS that a few other counties are allowing it, but we don't have that list. So it's unclear. But from what we've heard from other attorneys around the state, it's not a widespread practice, and it is unusual to allow youth to remain.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question that I'm going to throw out to any of the lawmakers if they would like to answer this. And the question is, what is the soonest that the legislation introduced to extend foster care past age 21 could take effect?
Well, I could start, but obviously we have to pass it in both houses. And we are, you know, as everybody knows, though may not fully understand this, we are in session until the end of the year. That is the legislative session ends on December 31st. So we are likely to come back at least a few times in that during the next 5-6 months, and hopefully the next time we come back, which I'm hoping will be this month, we could get this passed in both houses, and the governor could potentially sign it right away. And that would be the ideal scenario.
Ellen, Assemblymember Jaffe, did you want to speak?
Yes, I do, because what we need to do is work together, have a dialogue and a conversation, and really develop a plan of how we're going to move forward. Perhaps we can set up a meeting with the governor's office. Perhaps we can, reach out to leadership within the Senate and come together and work together and advocate in a very focused way, so that there is understanding that this is something that we consider essential. And join the Assembly members and as well as Senate and really put together language and see if we can set up a couple of meetings with the governor's office and see if we can move forward with this.
Okay, thank you, Assembly Member. And I'm going to turn things over now to Senator Montgomery to respond.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you, Dee Dee, and CHAMPS and the advocates for putting us together today. And I just want you to know I've been listening since the very, very beginning. So that you didn't hear me doesn't mean that I wasn't paying attention. And I will be in Albany next week. I had a conversation with our staff, my staff, this week earlier. And next week, I'll be in Albany to meet with our council to make sure that this issue is a very, very important one for us to consider passing this session. It's extremely important, and we look forward to it actually moving in our House. And I am sure that the same sentiment exists in the Assembly side. So hopefully, at least as elected officials, we will do our part before the end of the year.
Thank you so much. And I do want to follow up to say two things. One is once this legislation gets to the governor's desk and hopefully quickly signed, then it goes into effect immediately. So that's important. And then I just want to emphasize again that no matter how quickly our legislative champions move this, and we know that you're going to be making this a priority, and we're so grateful. But really, the quickest way to get relief for our youth in foster care is for the governor to sign an executive order, and that could be done immediately. And so we are still hopeful that immediate action could be taken by the governor. But again, we won't stop until these youth get the support they need. We have another question, and I think, Betsy, I think this is yours. What was the reason OCFS or the governor's office stated that they wouldn't impose the moratorium? And do these bills have bipartisan support?
Yes.
So I think I can probably answer the first part of that question.
That's fine.
With respect to OCFS and the governor. And the reason was not entirely clear. There was a lot in their response to us, included a lot of information about the numbers of young people who are in foster care, and statements about how hard the foster care agencies and the departments of social services are working with young people, and statements about what a great job they're doing. And really, ultimately saying that they didn't seem to see a reason or a need for this, despite the fact that, we know that the numbers show that young people continue to age out of foster care, and that employment is virtually impossible to find, and that connecting to housing has been very, very difficult for young people. So that's been really the crux of their response.
Yeah, and I can speak to, and just to follow up on that, there has been, we've heard some confusion or from some parts of that this legislation, that a moratorium would require young people who have reached or are older than 18, would require them to remain in care, and that there's reluctance on the part of the state to require young adults to stay in care, if particularly if they have a good transition plan. And we want to be very clear that that is not what this legislation would do. That is not what a moratorium by executive order would do. It just allows for that possibility. It prohibits pushing young people out of care when they're not ready, when they don't have the supports that they need, but it does not require that they remain in care. So I think that's a really important distinction. And you know, it can be a little confusing. So I wanted to clarify that. As far as whether the bills are have bipartisan support, these are new bills getting new sponsors every day. So I don't know that I can speak to that. I don't, we're happy to follow up afterwards, and we will. I don't know if any of the lawmakers on the phone or anybody else is more up to date than I am, but.
I mean, I think you're right. We introduced ours right away and just kind of, you know, just started moving through the process. It wasn't, you know, we didn't have the luxury of time at that moment, but, you know, we can check back and see as, you know, what the support is, but I don't really see it as something that shouldn't have bipartisan support. People have, you know, foster youth are in every county and in every district of our state. So I think that our colleagues understand this to be something that impacts young people statewide.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question, and I'm going to direct this one to Crystal Charles, who is a policy analyst at the Schuyler Center and who heads up our child welfare work. The question is, have local departments of social services expressed concern about looming cuts to their funding that would impact their ability to continue providing services to youth past age 21?
Thanks, Dee Dee. So we have been hearing from our colleagues that there are these 20% cuts currently being implemented. Mostly it's at the city level, not the county level. But one of our major concerns for the moratorium, especially for the state funding piece, is that counties, including New York City's counties, can't sustain paying for extended foster care indefinitely. We don't know how long this current crisis is going to last, and if there's another one after this, that's another question that will come up. How long can counties continue to pay for extending foster care past 21? So that is why we are continuing to push for this moratorium to be implemented and quickly, because without state support, it's only a matter of time until counties can no longer continue to support kids past 21.
Can I just add one more thing there? And I think it's really important to remember that when young people are pushed out of foster care prematurely with no place to go, they are likely to rely on other county funded services, the shelter system, food banks, income programs. It's harder for them to get jobs if they haven't been able to finish their education. All of that in the long run is much more costly to the state and the counties than temporarily allowing them to remain in foster care until they can be discharged to stable housing with a source of income or appropriate educational training that will allow them to obtain employment.
Thank you. So the next, we have another question, which is, does anyone know why a 180-day moratorium was requested as opposed to a 365-day moratorium? And I can start by just saying, we're all keenly aware that New York State is facing some severe fiscal challenges, and so we were, trying to figure out sort of the right balance. Also, it's important to underscore that the 180 days doesn't begin until the state is fully reopened. The pandemic is really behind us, so we are hopeful that 180-day number is enough to help to give youth the time they need to get oriented in the post-pandemic world. But we would note that California just passed a law that would actually would extend services for 365 days after the state reopens, and really, yes, that would be better. And really, in the ideal world, no young person should ever age out of foster care without a family. So yes, 365 days would be better. But this is a good incremental step in the right direction. Okay, one more. Has the state been asked to extend services until December 30th, 2020, using coronavirus relief funds? I'm going to just throw that out. Does anybody want to respond to that?
I don't know.
Okay, so we are going to get back to you, Jennifer, with a response to that. So I am not seeing any other questions in the box. So I'm going to close things out. I really want to thank everyone for taking time this morning to stand with us, to stand with our legislative champions. And I think I can speak on behalf certainly of CHAMPS New York, and our many advocacy and provider partners and our lawyer partners, and say that we are right there with you, Assembly members and Senator Montgomery. We will be fighting hard to get this legislation passed, and we are so grateful for your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us, and thanks for your support.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving forward.